The place to be found, my dear, is both spiritual and physical. But it is absolutely a spiritual place before it is a physical place. Okay, it's a spiritual occurrence before it is a physical place. Okay, so we are going to be breaking down the difference between the place to be found spiritually and then physically in this video. You need to be in position physically, as in physically preparing, making physical room in your life, maybe letting go some old toxic friends, some dead weight, okay? But you also need to make room spiritually. You also need to be cleansed and purified and prepared spiritually, okay? Fruits of the Spirit producing various characters, and you will help you to identify your spouse, or will help your spouse to identify you. We know this, women of faith are called to be fruit inspectors. If you have fruits produced and pruned in you, you'll be able to identify those same fruits, or perhaps what's missing in someone else. We've spoken about needing love, peace, joy, the 3 greatest fruits, and then having patience, long suffering, meekness, mildness, goodness, gentleness. Okay, I think I threw a couple other fruits in there, but we're going to work with it. Okay, you need those things pruned in you so that you can identify, is this the person God really has for me? And we spoke about this between the season of confirmation, the preparation, and being able to inspect fruit. You will know, you'll have a very solid spiritual knowing, or a spiritual revelation that this really is the man God has for you, or the woman God has for you, based on those things. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's address first the spiritual occurrences that must be in place or currently occurring so that you can be found. Okay, you need to be humble. I'm gonna just drop that right there real quick. You need to be found a humble woman and a humble man. God does not deal kindly with the proud, with the haughty, with those who are puffed up and so full of themselves that they can't see how their ignorance and their arrogance is affecting them and their ability to connect with people around them. We know that ignorance is you don't know anything, and arrogance is you think that you do. Or ignorance is that you think you know, you don't know anything, but arrogance is thinking that you do. You don't know everything. Let the Lord humble you. Let him show you a thing or two. Let him instill the fear of God in you. You'll see that you really don't have an excuse to be arrogant because of our human ignorance. Okay? You don't need to be walking around here proud, puffed up, full of yourself. Okay? Allow God to humble you for a season. Allow him to strip you like Job. Allow him to prune some things in you through his Holy Spirit. Allow him to teach you things. Okay? Teach you the mysteries of his temple, of his kingdom. Allow him to reveal to you your calling, your purpose, what you were put on this earth to do. Allow him to show you that you are not incomplete without a partner, that you can be a whole, complete person in partnership, but that there are things that will be developed in you only in marriage, that there are certain experiences that you'll only understand the depth of those experiences in marriage. Okay? Allow the Lord to show you a different side of things that you may be blinded to see because of your inability to be humbled. And I'm not saying this in a condescending way. We all need to be humbled, and we all are humbled. When you say yes to the kingdom, he will absolutely humble you, okay? So that he can elevate you in his due season. So being humble means, are you teachable? Okay, are you open to instruction? Are you open to learning a new way of doing things? Are you open to admitting that you don't know everything? Are you open to learning from your king, learning from your queen, okay? Learning goes both ways. Are you open to being both the student and the teacher? Are you teachable, but can you also share a thing or two with your spouse in a tactful, respectful way? You don't need to be condescending with your spouse. And this is a spiritual heart posture that is developed in your singlehood. Can you speak with tact, with humility, with grace? Okay, these are things that show your heart posture of humility. Or are you quick to correct people, cut them off, cut them down in speech, okay, to be disrespectful, to be condescending, or to be arrogant? Okay, mind the way that you speak, mind the way that you present yourself, because that is essentially how you'll be presenting yourself in marriage on the daily. So are you showing God that you're humble, that you can be humbled, that you can allow him to exalt you in his due season, my dear? Crowns are very heavy instruments, okay? Do you lighten your king's load at the end of the day with your humility by helping him carry the weight of the world on his shoulders? Are you humble enough to lend a helping hand, to put people's needs ahead of yours sometimes? Are you really a humble servant? Do you have that heart posture built in you Do you take the weight off of his shoulders, or do you merely add to his list of to-dos without offering a helping hand? These are major keys to understand the sacrifice and the level of service, the level of servanthood or service required of you in marriage. If you do not understand these things now, you will not be found, and you will not be found humble, which is a very attractive trait, especially in the kingdom. God has not put you through a process of being humble to pair you with someone who is prideful. He would never do that, because you all would not complement each other in a healthy way. Sure, your humility could teach your spouse about how to be a little bit more humble, but that's not really your job. If you allow God to accurately and thoroughly, not even accurately, if you allow God to thoroughly prune your spouse before he brings you into partnership together, you won't really have that much humbling to do of your spouse. And you wouldn't want to. Humbling is really God's job. He will exalt you all together in your marriage if you allow him to humble you now. Okay, my dear? So, are you teachable? Okay, this is all part of being able to be humble. Are you teachable? A king is looking for a humble heart posture, a humble disposition, a servant heart, someone who trusts in his ability to lead, someone whom he can rely on, someone who's dependable, teachable, someone who can learn from him and not try to usurp him, okay? Not try to speak over him or have the final word, okay? Are you humble enough to not have the final word? Are you humble enough to allow him to make decisions for the two of you? Of course, considering your opinion and your point of view, okay? And we'll be talking about biblical leadership in a couple weeks. But are you humble enough to know your place as his wife? And when I say your place, it's not calling you the weaker vessel. It's not calling you a lesser human being, okay? But by being an extension of him spiritually, okay, you have to know that as the head, he has an authority in your life. This is the reality. God has authority in your life. So if you're struggling with understanding submission and having a male presence as an authority in your life, next week's video is going to change your life, okay? We're going to talk about submission next week. So I implore you to tune in next week so we can discuss that, because you can't go into marriage with a skewed view of submission. You'll miss the mark every time, my dear. Are you able to submit to him, okay? Are you able to be that divine helper that he needs, or are you trying to be a co-leader with him, okay? Because there's a difference. Do not be a Vashti, okay? Speaking of Queen Esther and King Xerxes, don't be a Vashti trying to show that you are in a leadership position in your marriage, or that you can publicly disgrace your husband and get away with it. Vashti's downfall is not the fact that she stood up for herself, I would say, but it was the fact that she publicly disrespected her husband and didn't think that there would be consequences. She publicly turned him away during a week of celebration, and he could not stand for it because of what it would have connotated, because of what it implied for the onlookers, for the people at the party, okay? Her behaviors imply that he is not essentially the head of his own home, of his relationship, and that she can easily, veto, or, that she can easily say no or be very flippant about her public responses to him, because dealing with things in private is a little bit different. Doesn't mean that there's less respect, but it is a little bit different. And he had to handle that. He had to make sure that people knew that the husband is the head, and that the wife cannot blatantly disrespect him and have no consequences. So don't be a Vashti trying to be the head or even a co-head with your husband. Are you humble enough to know your position in his life? It is one of importance, but you are not inherently the leader, my dear. And you don't have to, and you shouldn't resort to disrespecting your husband to feel heard, to feel seen, to know that you have a place in his heart. And if you don't understand this in singlehood, it will be very difficult for you to understand that in marriage. Don't be a Vashti causing shame and dishonor upon your king. And that's another facet of being humble. Vashti could have responded in a number of different ways. She didn't have to publicly disgrace her king. There was another way to show that she didn't want to attend his party. Or there was another way, another discreet, tactful way of handling it, in my opinion. I'm sure maybe things are different culturally back in, those times. But there are different ways to show that you may disagree with your partner without disrespecting them. And that's a big difference. Can you still approach your husband with humility even if you disagree with him? You don't have to resort to disrespecting him. You don't have to resort to making him question his leadership or his decisions, or having to, affect change in the way that he deals with you, or, employ consequences on you because of how you treated him in public. Could you imagine the shame that she brought on him by her response? That was not a very humble response at all. Don't tarnish his name or reputation by openly disrespecting your husband. And that's another facet of humility. Can you handle, I don't want to say not being on the same page, but can you handle a disagreement with respect? Because there's going to come a time where you're going to disagree on something. It's inevitable. But do you start to lose respect when you don't get your way, when you don't feel heard? And, that's different, because he should absolutely make you feel heard. But will you begin to disrespect him if you disagree with a decision he's made? Okay? Humble yourself before both your kings, and at the right time you will be exalted, my dear. Humble yourself before your King of Kings and pray, petition God for a man who understands how not to abuse godly leadership, okay, how not to abuse a position of leadership in your life, so that submission is seamless and effortless for you, okay? Because you can only submit to a man who's worthy of submitting to. Okay, we're not asking you to submit to a dog or to swine here, okay? But if you are having trouble submitting to a respectful, honorable, trustworthy king, then there's a deeper issue there, my dear, okay? So, like submission, are you humble enough to admit that you don't know everything all the time, that you do have a husband to help you make these decisions, these bigger decisions in your life, or you have two heads that are better than one, and that you can use your husband's knowledge, wisdom, expertise, okay, experience to have a more well-rounded approach to a decision or to a situation, okay? Or are you still very, very selfish, I would say, or not understanding that your husband is a partner and not another child, okay? He's not a child. He's not someone that you are there to, give directions to, or give him a honey-do list, or, whatever else kind of happens inside of your marriage, okay? Are you humble enough to accept him as the earthly vessel, the earthly leader that God has given you in your life, okay, my dear?